Okay, the first one I thought of was in the car. I heard you say something I did not know. You said that Grandpa proposed to you on your first date.
Yeah.
So tell us about that.
Well, the first, his second cousin, Caroline Brick, and my roommate, and she was my roommate also along with Lydia Libke. We three girls shared an apartment in Madison. And she told me, talked about Arnie to me over the years, and several, I don't know how many years I lived with her there, but she was telling me all about him, and what a great guy he was, and different things that he was doing and everything. And she talked to him the same way when she saw him. She talked about me, and of course he'd seen my pictures and stuff, and I'd seen pictures of him. And so then we went up for a weekend, and Caroline was going to go home for the weekend, and she took me along. She stayed with an aunt and an uncle because her mother died. If it wasn't in childbirth, it was within a few weeks after childbirth. As a result, it seemed, of the childbirth, and so she never really knew her mother. And her dad was a Lutheran school teacher, and they lived with one aunt and one, I think it was his sister and husband, is one of Caroline's aunts and an uncle. And that's where we were going to visit there. And then she had called Arnie, and we were going to meet him at just at a bar up there in Manitowoc. And for a short while the evening that we got in, we took a bus up to Manitowoc from Madison. And that was so that we could meet each other. And then we were going to have a date the next night, which was Arnie's birthday, November 29th, 1940. And so we did that. We met him, and we had a good time. And of course, he felt like he knew me. I felt like I knew him, really, from all we'd been hearing. And we had fun. It was just fun, and Caroline was with us, and good. And so then he had a date for Caroline for the next night, and the guys picked us up, and we went out for dinner, and a place where they had dancing, and we had dinner and dancing and celebrated Arnie's birthday. And then after we got when we were sitting in the car talking, and then he asked me to marry him. And I said, I laughed. I said, I'm afraid. I said, no. I said, we don't know each other well enough to get married. We know a lot about each other, but I said, we've got to know each other for a while. You can't just meet somebody and know a lot about them, but, not really completely know the person. You want to know them better before you are going to get married. Okay, we talked about it a little bit, and that was fine. So then he made a date to pick me up to take me to church the next morning, Sunday. It happened to be that it was the 29th was on Saturday that year, and so he took me to his church, and he had joined a church in Manitowoc, which his folks belonged to a Wells Lutheran church out in the country, and he joined a Wells Lutheran, which is the strictest Lutheran church that there is, and he joined that one in Manitowoc. So we went there in the morning, and we had lunch, and then I took the bus back that night that late afternoon to Madison, and he had bought a pretty corsage for me. They still did that in those days, and took me down to the bus and sent me off to Madison, and then when I had been going with a fellow down there off and on, and then when I saw him, and I mentioned right away to him that, I'm leaving part out now, because when we said goodbye, we had made a date he was coming down on New Year's Eve, and he'd be down there to take me out on New Year's Eve, and that was fine. I made a date with him. So I wanted to tell this other guy that I made a date for New Year's Eve, and when I did, this fellow Madison blew his top, and oh, you can't do that to me. We started planning already, and he had a couple of other couples and their girlfriends, and and they had made plans to go out to a real nice restaurant again, where they always had dancing orchestras at that time, orchestras for dancing. This was a nice place, and well, then he made me feel so bad that I agreed with him. I guess I couldn't do that to him. So I wrote a letter to Arnie and explained it to him in the letter, and I never heard from him. Never heard a word. So I thought, well, there goes that, you know. Apparently, I'm not even going to hear from him.
Yeah.
And it was, I don't know, one of the first days of February on a weekend. I was staying up there. It was a Saturday. I stayed in Madison, and I was doing some sewing in my apartment, sitting there. Somebody knocked on the door, and I opened up the door, and there was Arnie. Hi. That was February, early February, first week. And we got married May 10th.
Wow.
But that was the story about him asking me the first time we went out.
So when was the real proposal then?
Well, then we were going together. Then he got a job down at May Steel in Mayville. And he was a night foreman down there. And so then we would see each other often. He'd come down, and one of the guys that worked with him lived in Stoughton. And so he'd come over and he'd see me on the weekend. We'd go out and he'd stay with this guy in Stoughton and his family. And then they'd work that way each week. And one time he was down a weekend and we were in Madison. He was ready to go back to Mayville again. He rented a room from Mrs. Bierchi, I think her name was. And he got a room and he got his breakfast and evening meal there, I guess, and she did his laundry and stuff, and I forget what he paid, but it was, not very much. It was real cheap in those days, and because we were still going through the Depression. But anyway, we were having just a little supper there in that restaurant, and they were playing Maria Elena on the jukebox. Funny how you remember those things, always had a jukebox going in the places then. And all of a sudden he looks over at me and he says, well, are you gonna? I look, am I gonna what? Well, are you gonna marry me? That was without any, just like that. I said, well, sure. After that time I was ready to say yes, so. But that was so funny. That was the end of that bit.
And that was the happily.
We were going to get married in June.
Okay.
But then there was the draft, they were being drafted all the time. And he didn't think his work would keep him out. He figured he'd have to go. So we wanted to get married sooner. So that's why then we moved it up to May 10th, which we thought was better anyway because my birthday was in June, June 11th. So then we got married May 10th. And it was a beautiful, warm day in May that time when we got married. Contrary to the last few years, so it had been. Mm-hmm. So that was very nice. And he never got drafted at all because he was needed in his work. Mm-hmm. But then he was foreman there in Maysteel, and the farmers came in. They worked their fields in the daytime, and they came in at night and made money at the factory working on something they didn't know what they were doing with. And he was a perfectionist, and they'd turn this work in, Then he'd have to figure out what did he have to do in order to make it fill the bill for the order they were filling, And he was slowly going crazy. And he got so, it seemed like practically anything he ate, he was vomiting it up afterward, and I thought sure he had something where he was going to die in. And the doctors, so they thought he had, what is that worst one you get, he had a nervous stomach is what he had, but they thought he had the other kind for sure. And anyway, they told him he had to quit his job. And so they said he had to get out where he wouldn't be pushed at all because of that stomach condition. So he said, if you can get out of farm, that's the best thing. Well, his dad couldn't get a farmer to help him either, and he needed help. So then we moved up and lived at his folks' farm that was about 2 years, I think we did that, and helped his dad out at that time. So, you see, this just keeps going, but I'll stop there and say that's it. And we wanted to have a child right away. Both of us did. I felt that way. Some don't want one, you know, they think, oh, he might be killed when he's over there. I wanted a child, so. And finally, we were married May 10th, 41. Finally, October 26th, 1942, she was born. We finally had a child. And of course, then Dick 15 months later. But